Hello virtual design students, this is Mrs. Hinch giving you our first video demo, so bear with me. What we'll be working on for week 4 is a deep realistic landscape, and in this landscape the goal is to have smooth gradations for both the sky and the ground, clouds, grass, and I want you to have 10 different trees at least in this image, and they should be different. So the size you want to go for is a 9x12, and we will be using only graphite pencil, so no color on this one. This is something that it will look like in the end, but I don't want you to worry. I'm going to walk you through each step, and for this first step we are going to work on the sky and the clouds together. Okay? So, one thing I want to talk about first and foremost is having different drawing pencils. We have different pencils for different things. So you'll notice that most drawing pencils will start with an H, 6H, and then they'll go on to gradually transitioning into a B. And the main thing I want to hit on is that when you think of H, think of hard. And what that means is that the lead is harder, and therefore what you draw is going to be slightly lighter than anything else. So then when you move on to the B, I want you to think of B for bold. And so what that means is that the lead is softer, and therefore it's going to lay down more color and be darker. Now you don't need anything super fancy for this drawing. Your normal writing pencil is absolutely fine, but if you have drawing pencils, feel free to use them. You're also going to want a tissue, or you can use your fingers, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So the first thing we'll be doing for the sky is laying down color. Now I want to show you really quickly how I'm going to hold my pencil. Instead of drawing like this, I'm going to actually hold the side of my pencil and start to lay color down lightly, and then I can always go back in and add more. And you'll notice that you're putting the pressure on the side of the pencil rather than the top. And it's going to take you a moment to fill in the sky, but what I want you to focus on here is going from left to right, gradually adding color. And what you don't want to do is to draw really dark lines off the bat or have things be really streaky, because when it comes time to blend, those are not going to blend very well for you. So holding that pencil on the side and just grazing it across the paper, let the pencil do the work here. You're just sort of the vehicle. So I have a relatively similar tone throughout happening here. Ignore that, we're gonna move on from there. I want to fill in my color. And actually, just going to fold that over so we don't get distracted. Okay. Now what we'll do is the top of this is going to be the top of the sky, and you'll notice in your example it's slightly darker at the top, and as it moves closer and closer to the horizon, which is the spot where the sky meets the ground, it gets lighter. So the sky is going to go from dark to light. So as you're shading, you can help yourself out by adding a bit more darkness and dimension only at the top, and then working your way down. And from here, what you'll do is grab your tissue and you're going to start blending. Now, blending, you can use a tissue, you can also use your finger. Just be careful because we have natural oils on our hands, and sometimes if you've got a lot of oil on your hands or something, you can make really funny smudge marks that will add grease onto your paper, which is not what we want to do because you won't be able to smooth that grease out. It's going to sort of trap the graphite pencil onto your paper and you can't really go back from there. So I always like to just go in with a tissue. You can use toilet paper even, just something that's kind of thin. Paper towel works as well. Make sure you're not eating Cheetos while you do this so you get orange on your paper. And I'm going over and I'm smoothing out the lines that I've made. And I want to create a really smooth sky. Something that feels really peaceful. And just to show you what happens if you go and apply your pencil too dark and in streaks like this, when it comes time to blend, the tissue is only going to do so much, okay? It can't work magic. So let's avoid applying the color too darkly, all right? So I've laid down a nice amount of color here. What I want to do now is go ahead and add a little bit more depth in my sky. So I actually want to just keep layering and building color. Now the only thing here is you don't want to go too dark. You can always go light to dark, but it's really hard to go from dark back to light. So layering that color gradually is going to really benefit you on this. Okay. And again, once you've added more color, smoothing that out. And the more time that you spend doing the smoothing part, the better and the smoother your overall image will look. So this is something that you do want to take your sweet time with, especially since one of the goals for this project is smooth gradations, right? So let's go ahead and start in on a cloud. You can use a normal eraser, you can use a kneaded eraser, or if you have one of these eraser pens, feel free. They're all going to have different effects. So I find that the kneading eraser is really nice for creating more of a mid-tone. Like if I have an area that's slightly too dark, the kneading eraser is great to pull some of that color out. But if I want something that's going to give me a little bit more of that high contrast that's happening up here, I'm going to want to use my actual eraser top or my eraser pen. And the way we'll go in with clouds is you're going to use your eraser in a circular motion. And as you're moving your eraser around your paper, creating your first cloud, you don't need to erase the whole thing. You can leave areas where there's some darkness. And you want to remember for clouds that they'll always be slightly flatter on the bottom and have rounded tops to them. And if you need to, feel free to Google some images of clouds. As you're going through this, you want to make sure that all of your clouds aren't the same, because it's going to make your image look a little bit more cartoonish rather than realistic. And we want hyper realistic here. So I can go ahead and get rid of my crumbs there. So I have a basic shape here. And what you'll do from here is you can take your tissue and add a little bit of graphite back into your cloud, because we don't want to totally lose the dimension here, right? So it's not going to be totally stark white in contrast to our background. The clouds have a little bit of life and shading to them. So if you pull too much out, you can always add more. And it'll take you a little bit of time to just go in and refine. I'm going to go in with my eraser pen and start to pull a bit more color out, especially at that top edge. That's where you're going to have the most contrast from your cloud to the darkness of the sky. And you can always go back in and add a little bit more dimension to your cloud if you feel like you want to have a little bit more depth. And then you can smooth it out with your tissue. Okay, it's kind of nice. And then if you feel like it's too dark, you can grab your kneading eraser and ever so slightly pull and drag some of that color out. Okay? Now you're going to add several clouds in here. And one thing I want to point out is that you are going to want to have a few clouds overlapping, because it's not that normal that you see clouds in the sky totally separated on their own. It's a lot more realistic if you see something overlapping. So make sure if you need to look for an image, go ahead and do that so that you can understand what that looks like. But once I go in and I get all of my clouds placed, you're going to go in and add a little bit more depth and darkness to the sky. And this is going to really bring out those cloud shapes and create a bit more of a high contrast. So just remember, we're going from dark down to light at the horizon. So I don't want to add too much darkness underneath my clouds, just a little bit, but not as dark as I went on the top. And then you want to blend that out. So I'll go ahead and just using lighter pressure, work that out so that it doesn't look like I have this outline on my cloud, because that's not very natural. That's like a coloring book. We don't want that. Now another thing I need to point out here is the size of clouds. You will notice that when you're doing this, your clouds towards the top of your paper should be larger than the clouds that are towards the horizon of your paper. And you can see that here. So my clouds that are at the very top, they're closer to us, they feel more real, they're bigger. As they get further down to the horizon, in theory, the horizon is farther away. So when things are farther away, they need to be smaller. When they're closer, they're larger. When they're farther, they're smaller. So as you move towards this horizon line, your clouds are going to get smaller. Okay? And from here, you can just keep working your eraser to pull out more color, darkening the sky. Just remember not to go too dark, and adding a bunch of clouds. Okay? Stay tuned for our next video. We will be going over grass next.